I'm quoting one of my recent articles over on jasonstelman.com. I've written a few on this topic of atheism, sort of fleshing out my ideas. And I wrote this. If the proper theological response to a heavenly kingdom promised by the super being of docetic and disembodied spirituality is atheism, as Caputo insists, but if we are nevertheless to work faithfully to see this world disturbed and disrupted by the ironic, weak, and foolish kingdom described in the Sermon on the Mount, then perhaps a new label is needed to capture the dynamic of this exilic posture, right? If we're supposed to, on the one hand, be very suspicious of and incredulous toward this genie in a bottle, deus ex machina, bearded man in the sky who flexes his muscles and snaps his fingers and makes all our problems go away, if we're supposed to be atheists with respect to that idol, as Caputo insists we are, but if we're also, on the other hand, still supposed to be faithfully hoping for and desiring a kingdom like the one described in the Sermon on the Mount that ironically disturbs and disrupts the status quo in this world, which, I mean, the Sermon on the Mount is, you know, if someone says go 1 mile, go 2. If someone slaps you on your right cheek, turn your other cheek. You know, blessed are the meek, for they shall be comforted, right? Blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you. It's all irony. It's all, don't pray where people can see you. Go into your room and shut the door and pray in secret, right? It's all very counterintuitive. And so if we're to be longing and hoping for that kind of disruptive kingdom on the one hand, but also we're to be atheists with respect to this magic, you know, genie on a, you know, floating around on a cloud or whatever, then maybe we need a new way to talk about it. And that's what Faitheism is, right? It's my, you know, perhaps lame attempt to capture these seemingly opposing dynamics in one idea, and then putting that, you know, clothing myself with it and seeing how it feels, and then, you know, taking it out for a spin, see how it functions, see how I like it, right? And so the next thing I want to get into is this idea that for Caputo, both atheism and theism are two sides of the same imperial coin, okay? So I've made this distinction between exile and empire. Empire is strong theology. Empire is muscular, declarative, you know, propositional theology that says, thus saith the Lord, this is how it is, this is who God, what God is like, this is what he's not like, this is the Bible, this is what heaven's like. All this certitude, all of that is empire, right? Well, according to Caputo, when atheists and theists fight, it's almost like an intramural exchange. Because, to use my own terminology, both of you are doing imperial work. Both of you are playing a game of thrones that Exile refuses to participate in, okay? For Caputo, both theism and atheism, traditionally understood, the theist being the classical theist, the atheist being like Richard Dawkins or Ricky Gervais or Christopher Hitchens or Sam Harris, these guys are two sides of the same coin. Here's Caputo. The two sides share the same presuppositions, isms aplenty, a war of isms, two sides of the same coin, competing versions of the same thing, two varieties of the same realism. Each side competes for the high ground of presence, capital P, of what is really real. One has God on its side, the other has a material universe, both very big deals. One looks up unctuously to the heavens, the other squints through its telescopes at the heavens, okay? Theists and atheists are bickering about the same big, strong man in the sky, while, as I said, Exile refuses to even engage in this Game of Thrones. Now, that's what atheism is. It is a theological, not the kind of atheism of Sam Harris and those guys, but the atheism that's a part of Faitheism is a discomfort with and an incredulity toward a suspicion of this sort of idolatrous version of God that we've inherited from, from strong theology, from empire, certainly from Nicaea and Chalcedon, and from St. Augustine and his City of God, all of that. But there is still a place for faith. And so this is where Caputo, and I think it's a helpful distinction, he distinguishes between faith and beliefs. Okay, foi and croyance he's following Derrida, the French deconstructionist, and so he's invoking the French categories, faith versus belief. Okay, and Caputo says this. He says, faith and hope and love are risky business and not for the faint of heart. Derrida's religion turns on an underlying faith that cannot be contracted to a determinate belief, be that belief a confessional religion or a professional non-religion or anti-religion, a theism or an atheism, right? And so Caputo's saying faith cannot be contracted, right? Contract, like, when a pregnant woman has contractions, when you take a word and you make it into a contraction, you shorten it. Faith cannot be abbreviated into mere beliefs. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and all things visible and invisible. I believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten of the Father, born of the Father before all ages, God from God, life from God, right? We say this every week at Mass. If you go to an Anglican church, an Episcopal church, you say it. It's the Nicene Creed. Faith is not reducible to intellectual assent to dogmatic propositions. Faith is a more broad, risky, indeterminate posture, and it's open to everyone, which is important, and I'm going to get to that. Faith, or excuse me, atheism and theism are both engaging in strong theology, and that is the jurisdiction of empire. I love how my throat is fine until I sit down and try to record this, and suddenly I just got a frog in my throat that won't go away. Caputo calls them, the theists and the atheists, he calls them the big strong men of reason are fighting with the big strong men of theology, right? Sam Harris is fighting with N.T. Wright, and that's what they're doing, is they're fighting amongst each other, and that's what we call a debate about atheism versus theism, right? But faith, unlike beliefs, is exilic, okay? It is an outgrowth of the weakness and folly of the cross. It's not as impressive, it's not as sexy, it's not as declarative, it's not as easy to footnote or catalog in an index, in endnotes or some sort of bibliography. It's not that kind of thing. Faith is a posture of hope against hope, right? As Caputo said, faith and hope and love are risky business and not for the faint of heart. It's a hope against hope for a kingdom that is ever to come, okay? It is foolish and weak like the cross, right? But what I want to drive home as we conclude here is that traditionally, the debate between an N.T. Wright and a Sam Harris is strong theology, right? It is an imperial endeavor, right? You are over here arguing about whether there's a big, strong man in the sky with a beard who gives people cancer and takes it away if we ask him hard enough and beg him enough to do it, or that there is not that big, strong man in the sky, right? So that's what they're talking about. They're talking about that grand genie in a bottle, that Deus Ex Machina, right? But Exile, as I said, is doing something else. It's not this atheism theism debate is not what we're interested in, right? It's sort of irrelevant, and it kind of misses the point. Okay, who is faith for? We know who beliefs are for, right? Beliefs are for those with the education or maybe the native philosophical acumen to parse such concepts as being, ousia, person, prosopon, essence, right? Hypostasis. But is that what faith is for? for those people with that kind of lexicon that they can draw from easily? No, I would suggest that faith is less determined than that. It's less dogmatic than that. It's weaker than that. It's more foolish than that. It's not just for those who can articulate Nicene Trinitarianism or Chalcedonian Christology, but if I'm not mistaken, and the book of Acts bears this out many times over, before Christianity was called Christianity, it was simply called the Way.